Champion, Pioneer, Hitachi, Elf Petrol World Champion, and Goodyear.
Hello and welcome here on Eurosport. John Watson and Allard Kalf bring you half an hour of warm-up for this afternoon's Belgian Grand Prix at the Spa circuit. The warm-up, which is about to start in 10 seconds, is, John, I think the coldest warm-up we've had all year, because the outside temperature is only 10 degrees, but the sun is shining and there's not a cloud in sight.
Good morning and thank you, Allard, and I have to say that my years of experience have taught me coming to the Spa-Francorchamps circuit, no matter what it might be in the middle of the day, it can be extremely cold as it is right now. And in fact, this is going to give, I would say, a very artificial picture indeed for all the 13 teams here this morning, because by the time this Grand Prix commences at 2 o'clock, it's going to be considerably warmer, and that really will be a major factor indeed in determining, first of all, what car setup are you going to go with? Secondly, when it comes to the choice of stopping or not, and it's not clear yet how many people will make that decision. For sure some are stopping, but there's a feeling in the pit lane that possibly the Williams team may be able to go through without a stop. And if that is the case, well, that is going to throw everything into confusion. Certainly those other people that are going to be chasing Williams, namely Michael Schumacher and Ayrton Senna, are going to find themselves looking and wondering what they've got to do.
Christian Fittipaldi, first driver out on the circuit. Christian, who made his comeback here last year and did not qualify his Minardi Lamborghini as it was then, when he had that accident in Magny-Cours. He came back here in Spa. He's qualified 21st, and that is a disappointing situation because they were right up the other end on the grid when we were in Hungary, but here the team is in a little bit of trouble.
Well, the difference, of course, really lies in the nature of the two circuits. The Hungaroring did suit the Minardi very well, but here in Spa-Francorchamps, it's a circuit, once again, where the actively suspended cars have a significant advantage because of the speed variation from the very high speed, for example, of Eau Rouge and coming through Blanchiment, as we see Christian Fittipaldi, and then down to the very low speeds into the bus stop chicane and the La Source hairpin band, which precedes the start-finish line. So the balance and speed is very, very big indeed, and that's where active suspension really does come into its own.
Drivers going back into the pits. We're watching Thierry Boutsen, who ran out of fuel on his slowing down lap yesterday in the second qualifying session. Stopped at the bus stop chicane, and well, he said, actually, I said, Thierry, what happened? He said, oh, I lost my way a little bit and I couldn't find a way back, so I stopped and asked the marshals. He said, no, but we basically run out of fuel, so that calculated it pretty good. I think, John, the big question is, although it's 10 years of Formula One, is this Thierry Boutsen's last Belgian Grand Prix?
Well, we mentioned it on one of our broadcasts earlier over the weekend that Thierry Boutsen has been over in America and he's been looking at IndyCar racing. He seems to think that might suit him better because the current crop of Grand Prix cars are not, let's say, easy cars to come to terms with, and Thierry has had 10 years of Grand Prix racing, and he may just feel that a change is as good as a rest. And of course, looking at Nigel Mansell and the impact that he has made on IndyCar racing, I'm sure a lot of Grand Prix drivers who might find themselves unemployed at the end of this season can see a way of extending their motor racing career and as well earning a bit of money.
Luca Badoer in the Lola Ferrari. Well, a car which has been dubbed as an Indy car in Formula One, actually. The car's very big and has been basically the slowest Formula One car this year.
Well, obviously very disappointing for the Scuderia Italia team. They changed from Dallara chassis, and they hope that British technology on the chassis design side would have helped their cause a great deal. Of course, with the Ferrari V12 engine, it was an opportunity for Ferrari themselves to compare what they're doing in their own team with what the Eric Broadley-based team in Huntington were capable of producing. But so far this year, it has been undoubtedly a great disappointment to the team, and discussions and rumour again in the pit lane regarding possible amalgamation of the Scuderia Italia team with the Minardi team. Quite who would be the beneficiary out of that type of marriage is difficult to tell, because right now Minardi has done a very, very good job indeed, scoring some 7 points in the Constructors' Championship to the 0 that Scuderia Italia have managed to pull. And one would think that something like a Ford HB engine, which is what Scuderia probably would be better off using than the very sophisticated but, let's say, inconsistent V12 Ferrari engine, with the expertise of a small privately owned team like Minardi, has been running for the past number of years.
Just had a look at the spectators who are around the Spa circuit at the moment. There are some 44,000 German fans coming to Spa today, while we are looking at Gerhard Berger. Gerhard, who had a dreadful qualifying session yesterday, did not get out and do a quick time. He's back in 16th position, and that is 12 places behind teammate Jean Alesi. And Gerhard had an engine problem yesterday morning and then an active problem during the 1 hour qualifying session. But John, while we watch Gerhard Berger, the top 10, if we have a quick look, if you haven't seen Eurosport all week, Alain Prost, Damon Hill on the front row, Michael Schumacher and Jean Alesi on the second row, then Ayrton Senna and Aguri Suzuki. Suzuki, who was a couple of tenths quicker than teammate Derek Warwick, both footworks in the top 10, and then Tracy, Leto and Herbert. Let's say an unusual bottom half of the top 10, John.
We haven't had those people there for quite a long time, and of course what that will do is just add excitement to the start of the Grand Prix, because the start just to the right of your, or to the left of your picture, in fact, leads up into one of the most notorious corners here at Spa-Francorchamps, which is La Source Herpen, and it is often la source of a great deal of excitement and action. So we, in fact, 2 years ago had 3 starts to this Grand Prix, because every time they tried to go round the corner, somebody failed to negotiate it, but usually barged into another competitor. And just looking back at Gerhard Berger, way back on the 8th row of the grid, Gerhard is a man who is a charger, and if there isn't a gap, he is quite liable to find it or make it. Alain Prost, of course, in pole position. He's in the best place to take advantage of his pole position, but he's got to get off the start cleanly, and he's failed to do that more often than not this year. So the man directly behind him, Michael Schumacher, will be also looking for the window of opportunity. So La Source undoubtedly going to provide a great deal of tension, excitement. Hopefully it will not result in anybody having a very early bath.
Ayrton Senna not happy with his car. On Friday afternoon, his quote to the press was, "The car is not good," which basically said it all. And then,
in fact, that's an improvement in how it was in Hungary, because he refused to make any comment whatsoever, even to the team's PR official. But what was significant, I felt, for Ayrton Senna was in Saturday's qualification, he went out and ran on his 2 sets of race tyres in qualifying. He had the option to put the best of both sets on the car and go out and finish his allocated 12 laps. And he said, forget it, it's not worth it. That is a rare comment from Ayrton Senna, and it is indicative of how he sees the competitiveness of his team and of this chassis.
Being a little bit quicker at the moment than the fastest man so far, Rubens Barrichello. Then it's Christian Fittipaldi, Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi, but it's very early days yet. Most people have done one lap, and Ayrton is basically on his very first flying lap of this morning warm-up.
The danger a lot of teams are going to face is in this session, because the ambient temperature and the track temperature are much, much lower than we saw during the practice sessions on the previous 2 days, and certainly in qualifying on Friday and Saturday, is it is easy to sucker for major car changes, to go out and say the car is either fantastic, don't touch it, or the car is undrivable, we've got to do a complete setup. The temptation to do that is very great, and in most cases you should not do either. Leave it as it is. How you set your car up in those on-timed, unofficial sessions on Saturday morning, and to some extent in qualifying in the afternoon, is really how it is going to be this afternoon. And I can't remember, in fact, how many years it has been that we have not had a session or part of a race affected by rain. At the minute, the sky is just pure blue. It's beautiful. This is how people would like to come to the Ardennes and see a Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps. It's very rare indeed. And if we have got a race as it is right now, well, it should be a fantastic day.
There's the other front row man, Damon Hill, who has just gone fastest on the 1:56.7. Then it's Jean Alesi on the 1:58.031, and Ayrton Senna. That's the top three here in Spa at the moment. We have 20 minutes to go till the end of the warm-up, and we're going to have a small break, and then we're back with the remaining minutes here on Eurosport.
Eurosport Live.
Welcome back here on Eurosport. Welcome back to Spa, where we are watching Alain Prost, the pole position man, who is not in the top 20 at the moment, but on his flying lap. Damon Hill's gone faster yet again. Now it's a 1:55.105, and second fastest is Johnny Herbert, then JJ Leto and Jean Alesi.
Well, I think the reason why Alain Prost has not appeared on the top 20 list is the usual one, and that is Alain Prost has got the option of a race car or a spare car, and whichever car he wants to drive, he will have to make that decision in this 30-minute session. So he will have gone out in one car, done a lap, come in, jumped into the other car, done the same. He will then decide which of the two cars he wants to continue with. So from the beginning of this lap, this is Alain Prost on his first proper timed lap. As we see yet again a Ferrari creeping very slowly. And that Gerhard Berger once suspects that it is.
They're having a lot of problems at Ferrari this weekend, John. They've had engines go in Friday, they've had engine problems on Saturday, and again in the morning warm-up there are problems with the Ferrari. Well, Alain Prost is now 0.2 of a second slower than Damon Hill on that very first intermediate, and Damon's gone faster yet again. Now that is quite usual. Every time you come past start-finish, you go faster and faster. And now it's last year's winner, Michael Schumacher, the man who qualified right behind on the starting grid then, right behind Alain Prost, is fastest on the 1:54.122.
Well, I think this Grand Prix is going to be certainly a race dominated by Williams and Renault yet again, but it is also going to be a race of a degree of strategy, and that is where Schumacher and the Benetton Ford are going to be very, very strong indeed. And going back to the start, Michael Schumacher directly behind Alain Prost. Whether that's an asset or not, I'm not quite sure, but by being on the right-hand side of the track, certainly he's got the easiest line into the corner, and if he has to be a bit sort of bullish about it, if Damon Hill is trying to maintain his second place, he will be on the outside of the corner, Schumacher will be on the inside. So that first corner really counts for a great deal. It's Prost now about to complete his first lap, 56.190, and that pops him into third place. Just 2 seconds off the time so far achieved by Michael Schumacher. Now the two Benettons running nose to tail.
Top 10 changing all the time, and there we see Michael Schumacher. Yesterday in qualifying, his car sliding around a lot while we are watching the top 8, and behind that, Riccardo Patrese not being very nice with his teammate.
Not at all, and that Benetton appeared to me to be almost as wide as the width of the racetrack, and there was no, and Michael Schumacher now slowed right down. He's decided that teammate Patrese is not going to be very helpful. He literally accelerates flat out through the bus stop chicane to pick up his speed across the start-finish line, and he will hope that he's given himself sufficient gap. Oh, and what's that all about, Michael? Well, there's another lap that's totally wasted. One factor which we have not spoken about, Allard, this weekend is the new starting device which Benetton have been developing. And it is extremely clever, extremely tricky. And literally what it involves is a clutchless start in the literal sense. In other words, the driver does not have his foot on the clutch and the car in gear between red light and green light. The car is in gear. There's a mechanism which has not been explained to us, but is extremely clever and sophisticated. And what the driver does is when the lights go green, he pushes a button and the car then literally just takes off. And I've seen this in practice, and it is quick. Now, whether the Benetton team have chosen to run it this early in its development or not, they're not saying. I did ask Tom Walkinshaw over the weekend, and Walkinshaw redefined the meaning of being a canny Scot, because he looked at me like, what are you talking about, John?
Riccardo Patrese, 2 corners away from the very fast part of the circuit, the Blanchimont section. And John, we'll come back here next year in Spa, where we are looking at a bit of bodywork which has to be repaired. And I think the big question is then, is there going to be more runoff around Eau Rouge?
Well, I think the question of Eau Rouge is a perennial one, and it is a fantastic corner. The problem is that if something goes wrong in that corner, as it did big time for Alessandro Zanardi on Friday morning, you are literally just going to ricochet from one side of the track to the other. Now, the testament to all this, of course, is the integrity and strength of current Formula One technology, and Zanardi, fortunately, was virtually uninjured. He'll be certainly very sore. But is it right these days to have that type of corner in Grand Prix racing? I've no problem with the corner. I just would like a bit more space, that if a driver does make a mistake, as in the case of Zanardi he did do, the penalty is not as severe as it was. And Zanardi in reality was extremely fortunate that he was able to be carried out of that car virtually uninjured, certainly very shocked, heavily bruised, but otherwise uninjured.
That's the feeling most drivers share here. They say, please don't take away that corner, but also, please, can we have a bit of runoff on the outside? Because it is very tricky indeed. Which is what they did to Blanchimont a couple of years ago.
Blanchimont was a very, very hazardous corner. They've given a lot more runoff on the outside. Although you see Aguri Suzuki in his footwork, one of the smoothest cars all weekend through that section of circuit. Again, an indication that the benefit of active ride is very considerable. And the footwork team very happy indeed with progress that they're making.
I was talking to Jackie Oliver yesterday, John, and he said people are talking a lot about the fact that directed suspension works well, that the Mugen engine might be a little bit better. He said what they forget, and he wanted to stress this, he said what they forget is that Alan Jenkins has done a super job in making that car work. He said that should not be underestimated.
I must say it's very good that a team principal gives credit to individuals and names them out, singles them out in a team. That is something that in other teams we see is not the case, that the team prefers to be bigger than the individuals that are in it. And Alan Jenkins has worked very hard indeed over the last 2 or so years to get this footwork team to a competitive position, and well done Jackie Oliver for giving him that recognition.
And of course Alan Jenkins, the designer of the footwork car, who is not going to use a Mugen Honda engine next year. and they say they've done an engine deal, but they don't want to say what it is as yet. Situation up front is still that Michael Schumacher is fastest, Damon Hill second, Alain Prost in third, then Johnny Herbert, Ayrton Senna, Mark Blundell now up to sixth, and then Andrea de Cesaris. That is the top 7 here. And de Cesaris, who's been quick actually all weekend, John. Quicker than he's been of late anyway.
He certainly on Saturday morning was very impressive indeed. He had a problem in qualification. Some of the underbody on the car got damaged and he lost a lot of downforce. But Andrea's always been impressive here at Spa-Francorchamps. Back in 1983, in fact, he led for the bulk of the Grand Prix when he was the lead driver in Alfa Romeo, only to stop just close to the end, and that was the nearest Andrea's been to Grand Prix victory.
Schumacher, Hill, Leto. That's the situation with 8 minutes to go. We're going to have a very small break here on Eurosport, and then we'll be back with the last minutes of the morning warm-up.
Eurosport Live.
Four and a half minutes to go till the end of the session here in Spa, when Damon Hill has just put in the fastest time so far, a 1:53.1, which is a second faster than Michael Schumacher. Ayrton Senna, we're watching him. He is currently in 6th position, behind Johnny Herbert, Alain Prost, and JJ Leto up in 3rd. And the Sauber team, John, have been on the pace all weekend. They've been the fastest passive car, and they've been quick.
A very impressive performance indeed from JJ Leto to be 3rd quickest at this stage. But one wonders, are they actually running the car with race fuel, or have they got maybe something less? If that is a full fuel time, then a very, very fine performance indeed by Sauber. Looking down the field, you see that his teammate Karl Wendlinger, in fact, down in 17th place, and he's some 3 seconds a lap slower, and that would actually be the difference between empty and full fuel tanks. So it'll be interesting to find out a little bit later whether JJ's time is a full tank run, or maybe just finding out what the car is like with, let's say, a lower fuel load than one would be carrying at the start of a Grand Prix.
Interesting, John. Ayrton Senna was a little bit quicker than Damon Hill when they came up to Les Combes on the first intermediate. Also, he's taken one plane out of his rear wing. So could we see Ayrton Senna trying a very low downforce setup to get some straight line speed and maybe being able to pass people down the straight?
I think 2 factors for doing it. One is overall handling and balance, and the other is straight line speed, as you say. Now it's a question of whether he can get through this section of circuit, and that really is the part of the circuit where people have lost so much time over the past 2 days. But remember, the only places on the circuit that overtaking is realistically possible is up the Camel Straight into the Les Combes section of circuit. So it's a gamble, and Senna is quite right to go through this exercise and see how good or bad the car is and that kind of downforce setup.
Senna's best so far of 56.7. He's improved on that and is now in 3rd position, 1:55.188. Well, Michael Schumacher, I think quite a few people expected him to be fastest during this morning warm-up.
Well, there is a little bit of time left, but once Williams get their machine into operation, they still have got a very big advantage indeed over everyone else. And there's no pressure on them. They know they can win this race. What they've got to be aware of is that Michael Schumacher and Benetton are right on their heels. And if either car, and Michael Schumacher going very wide over the curb, he came in, had the brakes on, turned in with the rear brakes, still fairly heavily applied, and the back end slid out. He actually had to go across the grass, and only because we are following it here on Eurosport would you have known about it in the first place.
Michael Schumacher, who's currently tied with Damon Hill for 3rd position in the championship. That's nice. Someone else did it before him and knocked the cone off, John, which is lying on the circuit. This afternoon, Alain Prost cannot become world champion yet, but if the Williams team scores 3 more points than either Williams or either Benetton or McLaren, then the Constructors' World Championship is a done deal, and that stays in Didcot.
I think there's little chance of it not being a done deal, because after the Belgian Grand Prix there are 4 more races, and the probability of both Williams failing to finish in those is an improbability. Let's see what Mr. Prost can do. He has been fairly gentle so far this morning. He's currently 6th quickest, and that is Michael Schumacher. Will I, won't I, will I, won't I? And that little cone that you saw on the left-hand side of the screen became a movable reference point, and one thing you don't need in motor racing is movable reference points.
Prost coming up to some traffic in the form of Michele Alboreto. Oof.
I think Michele didn't have his mirrors adjusted particularly well there, because he gave Prost a brief heart-stopping moment. And he's going to have to contend with traffic in the Grand Prix. Certainly by third distance he will be beginning to lap people, and he will have to be able to pass people all around the circuit. He cannot just wait until the end of a straight on each lap to take advantage of his superior performance.
John, we were talking about pit stops earlier on. Now, the pit entry is very fast here. The pit exit is fairly fast. You don't lose quite a lot of time when we are watching Alain Prost overtaking Michele Alboreto in replay. But what does worry a lot of people is that the pit lane is very narrow.
I don't know what to say about that. It is narrow. People know about it. Ordinarily, a Grand Prix pit lane is 2 lanes plus a 3rd lane, which is in effect part of the racetrack. Here in Spa there are only 2 lanes, so the problem is if you had 2 competitors running very closely on the circuit, and they both stop at the same time and they both leave at the same time, you could have a race in the pit lane, and that might be dangerous.
Alain Prost, the 154, improves him to 3rd place on the grid, or sorry, 1st place in the warm-up, and he's got more laps to run. Well, there's got 1 more lap to go for Alain Prost, because in 20 seconds this session will finish. So if Alain Prost wants to finish up top spot in the morning warm-up, this is the lap he's got to do it on.
Martin Brundle has now become the quickest of the passive runners in his Ligier Renault. He's 5th quickest, just 1/10 of a second quicker than JJ Leto. And we already see Alain Prost at the first intermediate time is quicker than Damon Hill. But he's got to get away around Luca Badoer. You can see the lack of grip that Lola Ferrari slid wide, and Prost easily able to get underneath him coming down the hill into Pujo. This is the corner, I think, on the circuit that Prost personally likes the best. Very, very quick entry. Once you've turned the car in, it's flat on the throttle and picking up speed all the way around the corner and exiting it and taking top gear, 6th gear, around about 170 miles an hour.
Damon Hill had a 1:23.480 on this point, and Prost has lost time. So Alain Prost is not going to end up as the fastest driver during the morning warm-up here in Spa.
The point is he going to end up 2nd quickest? Because for Williams, this man is a little bit of a thorn in their side. They know that early in the race, Schumacher can push very hard. Indeed, his car start-up weight is going to be slightly less than that of a Williams. And again, this tyre situation is such an unknown factor here in Spa. Oh, Michael, that is not a very good way to take the Rivage. And we've seen a couple of occasions exiting La Source again. He let the car, the back, suddenly snap out. And certainly in Rivage, if you run wide in that corner, you see what happens. You get onto the dirty part of the circuit, you lose grip, and your tyres get clogged with all that rubber and dust. Here we see it in car. Now, whether that was just a little bit of lack of concentration as Schumacher makes his way back to the pits, or he was just trying something and wasn't paying the full attention. Well, Michael is usually very open and accessible, and I'm sure he'll let us know after the session finishes.
Damon Hill ends up as the fastest man during the morning warm-up here in Spa. Michael Schumacher in second place, then Alain Prost in third. Ayrton Senna moves up to fourth position. Martin Brundle, the fastest of the passive cars, as you said, John, while Schumacher goes straight on.
Well, that's again, he under braking. It's the second time we've seen him have a problem coming into the bus stop chicane. And he really wasn't, in my view, on a lap. He just appeared to be cruising around and not quite sure what he was attempting to do. The front brake, left front, in fact, it was this time. So the brake balance is not particularly consistent.
Actually, Schumacher just coming back into the pits, John. He just made a practice start coming when he drove away from the chicane. So Hill, Schumacher, Prost, Senna. That's the top four. Then Martin Brundle and JJ Leto. Johnny Herbert in seventh. Michael Andretti in eighth. And the gap between Andretti and Senna, 54.8 and 56.5. So from 3 seconds, that gap has come down quite a lot, actually, this morning. There we see positions 9 to 16 with the Ferraris, and Riccardo Patrese very disappointing. We saw Gerhard Berger there, we see Jean Alesi 18th, and Luca Badour in 23rd. And that's not a bad situation for the young Italian. 25th and slowest driver is Michele Alboreto, who is way off the pace here in the morning warm-up. This is all for the morning here from Spa. We will be back at half an hour before the start of the race, where we'll have interviews on the grid and interviews we made yesterday. John Watson and Allard Kell, thank you very much for watching this morning, and we hope you'll be back half an hour before the start of the Grand Prix this afternoon here on Eurosport.
The Formula One World Championship was brought to you on Eurosport by Ford, Formula One's most successful team. In association with Champion, Pioneer, Hitachi, Elf Petrol World Champion, and Goodyear.